8th graders, I'm Miss Henderson. I'm an ELA teacher at Ferndale Middle School, and I'm so excited to be learning with you today. For part 1 of our writing lesson, you should have paper or your ELA notebook, a pen or pencil, something to write with, your story organizer that we're going to be using in this lesson, and the calculation. Today we're going to organize our narratives to develop real or imagined experiences using well-structured event sequences. So why do we organize a narrative before we start writing it? As 8th graders, we don't want to just organize a story so that it's just a sequence of events. We want each event to have a purpose. Plot events need to work together to hold the reader's interest and reach a satisfying and believable conclusion. And each scene of a story has to play a role in developing a character and developing a theme. So we're going to be organizing our events purposefully. And you may have seen a plot diagram that looks very similar to this. We have our opening scene where we introduce the protagonist and the setting, leads us to our conflict where it's identified. The protagonist begins to take steps to solve the conflict in our rising action. And just like in life, we don't always solve our conflict easily. There's a force challenging us on the way to solving our conflict. And this is the turning point in the crisis. Then the protagonist regroups. They deal with that force that is challenging them and trying to keep them from solving their conflict. Then we make it up to the climax, which is the most suspenseful or emotional part of the story. The protagonist takes the last step to solving the conflict. Then we end with our falling action and our resolution. The action dies down, the protagonist usually, but not always, solves the conflict and is often changed in some way. And all of these events cause our character to change, and the way that the protagonist deals with the conflict is what's going to lead us to our theme. It's completely developed by the end of the story. So let's look at the way Anthony Horowitz organized the calculation. At the beginning of the story, Alex is sitting in the exam room in front of his exam. Then we identify the conflict. He cannot remember the equation he needs to complete and pass his exam. Then Alex realizes he can use the calculator created by Smithers. The turning point or crisis of this story is when Alex is looking at the calculator and thinking of all the ways he can use the calculator to cheat on this exam. Then he regroups. He looks around, he sees his friends working really, really hard on the exam, and he decides he cannot cheat. By the end of the story, we get to the climax. Alex is sitting in the exam room, and he chooses to focus on remembering the equation, and he's able to figure it out, which leads him to the end where he completes and passes the exam. So throughout this story, Alex goes from someone who doubts himself a little bit, he's trying to pass his exam, he doesn't think he can do it, so he might cheat on the test. He decides not to cheat on this test, believes in himself, and we end up with this theme, that it's rewarding to accomplish a goal or a task through your own hard work. So let's look at the way the author actually organized these events to develop Alex as a character and develop the theme. And this is the same chart that you are going to use when you're organizing your narrative. In this first column, we're going to list all the pieces we saw in that plot diagram. In the second column, we're going to list the scene, where and when the story was taking place. And then here is where we're going to focus on how the character develops throughout the story. And this last column is where we're going to address how each event leads us to our theme at the end. So in this chart, all I did was pull out the events that you saw in the plot diagram earlier, and I just plugged them in here. For our scene, just about everything in this story occurs in the exam room. He does a little bit of a flashback where we learn his relationship with Smithers and where he gets the calculator from, and then at the end he leaves through the corridor. So most of this story takes place in the same place. Now let's look how each event reveals something to us about Alex as a character. At the beginning of this story, when he's sitting in the exam room, we learn that Alex is a high school student. They don't have to come out and tell us that. We learn it because of where he is and what he's doing. Then we learn that Alex is also a spy and has missed a lot of school due to his missions, and that's why he can't remember the equation he needs for his exam. Then we realize that Alex really cares about his grades and that Smithers is his only friend at the spy agency because He's thinking, I can use this calculator to help me pass because I need to pass this exam. Then, when Alex is looking at the calculator and thinking all the ways that he can cheat, we learn that he's desperate for a passing grade on this exam, and he doesn't think he can pass the exam on his own, and that he's going to have to use the calculator to cheat, and that's the only way he'll pass. But then, when he looks around in the room and is looking at all his friends working really hard, we realize that Alex is a very honest person, and he really values how hard his friends have been working on this exam, and he feels like he should have to work hard too. Then Alex chooses to focus on remembering the equation and is able to figure it out. And we learn that Alex actually works really well under stress, which is a really good characteristic to have as a spy and probably why he was chosen. And by the end, Alex completes and passes this exam, and Alex is really proud of himself for being able to do this on his own. And we also learned that Smithers knew Alex well and believed in him based on the message he sends to him at the end of the story. So all of these events helped us understand things about Alex without the author having to come out and say he was in high school, or Smithers and him have a really good relationship and Smithers knows him really well. The author used these events to help us understand more about characters. Now let's look at how all these events help us develop this theme that it's rewarding to accomplish a goal or a task on your own or through your own hard work. So at the beginning of the story, we are introduced to the goal that he's trying to accomplish. He wants to pass this exam. Then when he realizes he can use the calculator, we learn that he wants to achieve this goal, but doesn't think he can do it on his own. And so he even goes to potentially cheating to accomplish this when he's thinking of all the ways that the calculator can help him pass. Then we get to kind of a turning point where Alex realizes he doesn't want to cheat to achieve his goal when all of his friends are working really, really hard. So he chooses to believe in himself and remembers the equation and completes the exam on his own. That's through his own hard work. And as a result of that, he completes and passes the exam and is rewarded with a passing exam grade. And the author doesn't even just say he passed, they say he passed with flying colors. So every single one of these events helped us take steps towards learning this lesson that if you work hard, you will be rewarded for it. Because if we didn't have this event here where he looks around and he sees that all his friends are working hard, then Alex doesn't make that decision to say, well, I want to work hard. I want to do this on my own. And we don't get here. So we always want to remember that every single event has a role in developing the theme or helping us understand something about a character. Now that we looked at the way Anthony Horowitz organized his story, let's think about the way we want to organize our story. So here's a suggestion for how you could start your narrative, and your teacher may have given you your own topic, and that's okay, you can totally do that, but here's just a suggestion. Maybe you can write about a time, just like Anthony Horowitz wrote about a time where Alex kind of struggled. You could write about a time where you encountered a challenge, a conflict, or something difficult. And think about where you were, the scene. What was the challenge or the conflict or the problem? How did this challenge make you feel? How did you handle this challenge? What were the steps you took to deal with it? What lesson you learned, or theme? And how did you change or develop as a person? Now I want you to use the same chart that I used to break down the calculation by Anthony Horowitz to organize your narrative. You're going to start with organizing your events in order. So we have to have our events in place in order to figure out how they're going to affect the character or develop a theme. So organize your events in order. Then say where and when they are going to occur. Then this is where a lot of the work is going to come in. I want you to then say, how is each event going to affect or develop your character? And then how are those events going to be working towards your theme or the lesson that was learned? So let's review what we did today. We reviewed standard story structure. That was that plot diagram. We reviewed the idea that authors organize a story in a way that the protagonist grows and changes throughout the story, and in a way that a theme or message about life is revealed through the character's response to the conflict. We also analyzed how Anthony Horowitz used the story events to develop Alex as a character and reveal a theme to the reader by the end using our plotting our key scenes chart. So after this lesson, organize your narrative using the plotting key scenes chart. Then go ahead and start writing your rough draft, because in our next lesson, we're going to be using that narrative. After this lesson, I hope it's a little bit easier for you to understand how to organize your narrative. Thank you so much for learning with me today. I can't wait to see you back here for our next lesson.